The mountain road twisted and turned like a coiled snake, the dense forest pressing in from both sides. Fog clung to the earth, swirling with the car's motion, blurring the line between the ground and the sky. Nathan's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his knuckles pale under the dim glow of the dashboard lights. He hadn't spoken for miles. Neither had Ryan, his best friend, slumped in the passenger seat, staring blankly out the window. They both heard the same rumor, the same whispered tales of the old Pinehaven Hotel, a relic hidden deep in the Rockies, abandoned yet rumored to still accept guests. For Nathan, it wasn't just about chasing thrills. This trip was personal. Nathan was the kind of person who buried his emotions beneath layers of sarcasm and bravado. But tonight, even he couldn't mask the tension building in his chest. His father had been a frequent hiker, an adventurer whose trail always led him to places no one dared to go. 4 years ago, the mountains swallowed him whole. No trace, no body. Pinehaven had been his last known destination, and Nathan needed answers. "You sure this is the right place?" Ryan's voice cut through the silence, hoarse and uncertain. Nathan glanced at the faded map on the dashboard, its edges frayed, inked with cryptic symbols and markings. "It's what the journal said." Ryan didn't press further. He never did. Where Nathan sought closure, Ryan tagged along for the ride, content to watch from the sidelines of his friend's obsessions. But even Ryan had to admit the rumors surrounding Pinehaven were different. Stories of guests who checked in but never left, of a hotel staff that didn't age, of strange whispers that seeped through the walls at night. The headlights caught the edge of a wrought iron gate, half buried under years of moss and decay. Beyond it, the silhouette of Pinehaven loomed, jagged and broken against the fog-draped peaks. "Looks cozy," Ryan muttered, but there was no humor in his voice. Nathan killed the engine, and the silence that followed was deafening. The air felt heavier here, colder, biting through their jackets. The gate groaned as Nathan pushed it open, and their footsteps crunched against gravel as they made their way up the overgrown path. The hotel stood like a forgotten giant, its once grand facade weathered and cracked. The wooden beams were gray with age, and the windows, dark and lifeless, seemed to watch them approach. A crooked sign dangled above the door, its faded letters barely legible, Pinehaven Hotel. Nathan hesitated at the threshold, a sense of unease coiling in his stomach. He told himself it was just the atmosphere, the isolation, the eerie quiet. He wasn't afraid of ghosts or curses. He was here for answers, not folklore. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit lobby bathed in the sickly yellow glow of a single chandelier. Dust motes swirled in the air, disturbed by their intrusion. The room smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic, like old blood. "Welcome." The voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a blade. Both men turned sharply. A woman stood behind the reception desk, her skin pale as bone, her dark hair neatly coiled into a bun. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We don't get many visitors this time of year," she said, her voice calm and measured. Nathan cleared his throat, trying to shake off the unease. "We're just passing through. Thought we'd stay the night." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment too long, as though weighing his words. "Of course, we have a room ready." She slid a dusty ledger across the counter, along with a fountain pen that looked older than the hotel itself. "Sign here." Nathan hesitated, then scrawled his name on the yellowed page. Ryan followed suit, his signature a messy scribble. The woman's smile widened. "Room 312, 3rd floor." She handed them a tarnished brass key, the number etched into its surface. "Enjoy your stay." Nathan pocketed the key, and they turned toward the staircase. It spiraled upward like a twisted spine, the carpet worn and threadbare. Each step groaned under their weight, the sound echoing down the empty halls. "This place gives me the creeps," Ryan muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "It's just an old building," Nathan replied, though his voice lacked conviction. They reached the 3rd floor, the hallway stretching out before them like a tunnel. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, its floral patterns peeling away in places. The air was colder here, carrying a faint, acrid smell Nathan couldn't place. Room 312 was at the end of the hall. Nathan unlocked the door, and it swung open with a reluctant creak. The room was small, with a single window overlooking the dense forest. The bed frames were iron, their mattresses thin and lumpy. A porcelain wash basin sat in the corner, its surface cracked. Ryan flopped onto the nearest bed, exhaling loudly. Cozy. Nathan set his bag down, his eyes scanning the room. It felt wrong, like they were intruding on something ancient and private. He shook off the thought and opened his father's journal, flipping through its pages until he found the entry that mentioned Pine Haven. "The air is alive here." Nathan read aloud, "Like the mountain itself is breathing. I feel watched, but it's comforting in a strange way. Perhaps it's the isolation." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Your dad wrote that?" Nathan nodded, his jaw tightening. "He stayed here. This is where he—" A sudden knock at the door cut him off. It was soft, almost polite, but it made both men jump. "Who the hell?" Ryan muttered, sitting up. Nathan crossed the room and opened the door. The hallway was empty. His pulse quickened. Weird. He closed the door and locked it this time. As the night deepened, the oppressive silence of the hotel seemed to thicken. The creak of the floorboards, the occasional groan of the old pipes, it all sounded louder, more deliberate. Nathan lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, sleep eluding him. His mind raced with questions, memories of his father surfacing like ghosts. Then he heard it, a faint sound like a whisper, coming from the other side of the wall. He sat up, straining to listen. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, but the words were unintelligible. Nathan's heart pounded as he approached the wall, pressing his ear against it. "Welcome back." The voice was clear now, cold and inhuman. Nathan stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. "Ryan," he hissed, shaking his friend awake. Ryan groaned, rubbing his eyes. "What? Do you hear that?" Nathan gestured toward the wall. Ryan frowned, tilting his head. "Hear what?" The whispering had stopped. Nathan's chest tightened. There was. Never mind. He sank onto the bed, his hands trembling. "Dude, you're just freaked out," Ryan said, though he didn't sound convinced. Nathan didn't reply. He stared at the wall, his mind racing. Something was wrong here, something more than old pipes and creaky floors. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to know what. Nathan lay awake in the dim, suffocating silence of the hotel room, staring at the ceiling while shadows from the window danced across its cracked surface. He didn't want to admit it, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. The whisper he heard earlier still clung to his thoughts like a persistent echo. But when he tried to convince himself it was nothing more than an overactive imagination, another noise cut through the stillness. Tap, tap, tap. He bolted upright in bed. It wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from the window. "Ryan, do you hear that?" Nathan whispered, his voice trembling. Ryan didn't stir. His breathing was deep and steady, as though he'd been lost to a heavy sleep that Nathan envied but couldn't share. The tapping continued. Faint yet deliberate, like someone or something was outside, trying to get in. Nathan hesitated, but then swung his legs over the side of the bed. The wooden floor was freezing against his bare feet. Slowly, he approached the window, his breath quickening with every step. The tapping stopped just as he reached it. He peered out, expecting to see nothing but the forest shrouded in fog. Instead, he saw someone standing at the edge of the woods. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, dressed in a tattered black coat that blended with the darkness. The figure didn't move. He just stood there, staring directly at Nathan, though his face was obscured by shadows. Nathan swallowed hard, trying to calm the growing sense of dread tightening his chest. But before he could react further, the figure vanished, dissolving into the mist like smoke. For a long moment, Nathan didn't move. He didn't trust what he had just seen. It felt unreal, like a dream. But then again, the air in this place had been heavy with something unnatural ever since they arrived. He backed away from the window, keeping his eyes fixed on it, as though expecting the figure to reappear. "Ryan," he whispered again, this time louder. Ryan stirred, groaning as he sat up. "What now?" His voice was groggy and irritated. "There was someone outside. I saw them standing by the trees." Ryan rubbed his eyes and glanced toward the window, unimpressed. "It's probably just some hiker. Or maybe you're seeing things because you're tired." He yawned, flopping back onto his bed. "Just go back to sleep, man." Nathan wanted to argue, but Ryan's dismissive tone made him doubt himself. Maybe he was seeing things. Maybe the stress of this place and the memories it stirred was playing tricks on his mind. He returned to his bed but didn't lie down. Instead, he sat on the edge, listening to the silence, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. At least, not right away. Morning came slowly, the dim light of dawn barely piercing the thick fog outside. Ryan woke first, stretching and yawning loudly. "You didn't sleep, did you?" he asked, glancing at Nathan, who sat slumped against the headboard, eyes bloodshot and weary. "No," Nathan muttered. "Something feels off about this place." Ryan shrugged. "It's old and creepy. Of course, it feels off. But we're here now, so we might as well make the best of it." He pulled out his phone, frowning when he noticed the lack of signal. Still nothing. Nathan ignored him, getting up to check the window again. The woods looked just as they had last night, silent, dense, and unnervingly still. There was no sign of the figure he had seen, but that didn't ease his mind. "I want to look around," Nathan said, grabbing his jacket. "Look around where?" Ryan asked, clearly reluctant. "Outside. Maybe there's something I missed, something that explains why my dad came here." Ryan sighed, but followed him. "Fine, but after that, can we at least get breakfast? I'm starving." They headed downstairs, the air colder than it should have been for morning. The lobby was empty, though the faint scent of mildew still lingered in the air. Nathan glanced toward the reception desk, but the woman from last night was nowhere to be seen. "She's probably sleeping in or something," Ryan said, noticing Nathan's expression. "Let's just go outside." But Nathan hesitated. Something about the emptiness felt wrong, as though the hotel had shifted overnight, becoming more unfamiliar. He shook off the feeling and followed Ryan out the front door. The air outside was sharp and cold, the fog thicker than ever. They made their way down the overgrown path toward the edge of the woods. But when they reached the spot where Nathan had seen the figure, there was nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone having been there. "You sure you weren't just imagining things?" Ryan asked, scanning the forest. Nathan didn't answer. Instead, his eyes caught something half buried in the dirt, a small, rusted object glinting faintly in the weak light. He knelt to pick it up, brushing off the dirt to reveal an old-fashioned pocket watch. The glass was cracked, and the hands had stopped at exactly 3:12. Ryan peered over his shoulder. "Weird, but it's probably just junk someone dropped a long time ago." Nathan frowned, turning the watch over in his hand. There was an engraving on the back, faded but still legible. "Pine Haven, 1914. "This isn't just junk," Nathan said quietly. "This belonged to someone who stayed here." "So? That doesn't mean anything. People have been coming here for years." Nathan didn't respond. Something about the watch felt significant, though he couldn't explain why. He slipped it into his pocket and stood. "Let's go back inside." They returned to the hotel, but the lobby was still empty. Nathan glanced at the reception desk again, half expecting the woman to appear, but she didn't. Instead, something else caught his attention, a large painting hanging on the far wall. It hadn't been there before. The painting depicted the hotel as it must have looked in its prime, grand and imposing with manicured gardens and bright, open windows. But something about it was unsettling. The longer Nathan stared, the more he noticed strange details, figures standing in the windows, faces blurred and indistinct. "Nate, you okay?" Ryan asked, noticing his friend's fixation on the painting. But Nathan didn't answer. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he noticed something else, a figure standing at the edge of the woods in the painting, dressed in a black coat, just like the one he had seen last night. His heart pounded. "Ryan, look at this." Ryan stepped closer, squinting at the painting. "What am I looking at?" "The man in the coat. I saw him outside last night." Ryan frowned, clearly uneasy. "Okay, that's creepy, but maybe it's just a coincidence. Or maybe your brain's playing tricks on you." But Nathan wasn't convinced. He turned toward the reception desk, determined to find the woman and demand answers. But before he could take a step, he heard it again, whispering, faint but distinct, coming from somewhere beyond the lobby. "Did you hear that?" Nathan asked, his voice low. Ryan nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, where's it coming from?" Nathan didn't answer. He followed the sound, leading them down a dark hallway that hadn't been there before. The walls were lined with old photographs, each one depicting scenes from the hotel's past. Guests dining, staff smiling, events held in grand ballrooms. But there was something wrong with the photos. The faces of the people were blurred, just like in the painting. The whispering grew louder as they reached the end of the hallway, where a single door stood ajar. Nathan pushed it open, revealing a small room filled with old furniture and dusty books. But what caught his attention was the journal lying open on the table. He approached it slowly, his hands trembling as he read the words scrawled across the page in familiar handwriting. "The air is alive here. I feel watched, but it's comforting in a strange way." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. It was his father's journal, the one he thought he had left in his room upstairs. But how had it gotten here? Before he could process what was happening, the door slammed shut behind them, and the whispering grew deafening. And then they heard the voice. "Welcome back, Nathan." Nathan stood frozen, the voice echoing in his ears like a distant thunderclap. His mind refused to process what he had just heard, but his body reacted instinctively, heart pounding, breath quickening, a cold sweat forming on his back. He turned to Ryan, who looked just as stunned, but also afraid in a way Nathan hadn't seen before. "Did you hear that?" Nathan whispered. Ryan nodded, his lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes darting toward the door. But the door was no longer there. The wall where it had been was now solid wood, smooth and seamless, as if no door had ever existed. "Okay, what the hell is going on?" Ryan muttered, his voice shaking. He took a step back, but then stopped when the floor creaked loudly beneath him. They both froze, listening to the silence that followed, a silence that seemed to stretch far beyond the confines of the room. Nathan approached the journal again, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. The handwriting was undeniably his father's, but the entries were wrong. The words described events that Nathan didn't remember, moments from a life his father never lived. But what struck him most was the final page, where a single line had been scrawled repeatedly in frantic, uneven strokes. "You can't leave once they know your name." Ryan read over Nathan's shoulder, his breathing growing faster. "We need to get out of here, now." "But how?" Nathan asked, his voice tight with fear. "The door's gone." Ryan glanced around the room, his eyes landing on a narrow window high up on the far wall. "There, we can climb through that." He moved toward it, pulling a dusty chair over and stepping up. But when he looked outside, he froze. "What is it?" Nathan asked, dread creeping into his voice. Ryan didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he said, "It's not outside, it's more of the hallway." Nathan climbed up beside him and looked out. Ryan was right, the window didn't lead to the outdoors. Instead, it showed a continuation of the hallway they had walked through, dimly lit and stretching endlessly into the fog. "This doesn't make any sense," Nathan whispered, climbing down. "It's like we're trapped in something that keeps changing around us." "But what is it?" Ryan asked, panic edging into his voice. "What's doing this to us?" Nathan didn't answer. He didn't know how to. But then he remembered the figure he had seen in the woods, the man in the black coat. And he remembered the painting, with its blurred faces and hidden figures. He had a terrible feeling that whoever, or whatever, was responsible was watching them, even now. "We have to keep moving," he said, trying to steady his voice. "If we stay here, we'll never get out." Ryan hesitated, clearly terrified, but he nodded. Together, they searched the walls for any sign of an exit. It took several tense minutes, but then Nathan found it, a narrow crack in the wood, barely visible in the dim light. He pushed against it, and the wall creaked open, revealing another hallway. "This way," he said, stepping through. The hallway beyond was different from the one they had entered before. The air was colder, heavier, and the fog that clung to the floor seemed to move with a life of its own. But they didn't stop. They walked quickly, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. But then, as they turned a corner, they saw something that made them stop dead in their tracks. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway, facing away from them. It was the man in the black coat. He didn't move, didn't make a sound. He just stood there, like a statue carved from shadow. "We should go back," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. Nathan shook his head. "No, we can't keep running. We have to confront this, whatever it is." "But what if?" "Trust me," Nathan said, his voice firmer than he felt. "We have to." Ryan looked like he wanted to argue, but then he nodded reluctantly. Together, they approached the figure, their footsteps slow and deliberate. As they drew closer, Nathan could feel the air around him grow colder, the shadows pressing in on them from all sides. When they were only a few feet away, the figure turned. But it wasn't a man. It was his father. Nathan stumbled back, his heart lurching in his chest. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. The figure smiled, but it was a hollow, empty smile. "Hello, Nathan." Nathan's mind reeled. He didn't understand. His father had vanished years ago. How could he be here now? And why did he look wrong? There was something off about him, something that made Nathan's skin crawl. What happened to you?" Nathan asked, his voice trembling. His father's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "I've been here waiting for you." "But why?" Nathan demanded, his fear mixing with anger. "Why didn't you come back?" "Because once you enter this place, you can't leave," his father said, his voice eerily calm. "It takes you, it changes you, and now it's your turn." Nathan shook his head, refusing to believe it. "No, we can get out. We just have to find the right way." His father laughed, a cold, empty sound. "There is no way out, Nathan. This place isn't real. It's a trap, a reflection of everything you fear, everything you regret, and it feeds on people like us." Ryan grabbed Nathan's arm. "We need to go, now." But before they could move, the walls around them began to shift, twisting and warping like liquid. The hallways stretched and bent, the fog growing thicker, until they could barely see a few feet in front of them. And then they heard it, the whispering, louder than ever, coming from every direction. "Run!" Nathan shouted, pulling Ryan with him. They ran blindly through the shifting hallways, the whispering growing louder and more insistent. But no matter how fast they ran, the walls kept changing, closing in on them, until they found themselves back in the same room where they had started. Nathan fell to his knees, gasping for breath. It's a loop. We can't get out." Ryan looked around frantically, his eyes wide with panic. "There has to be a way. We can't be stuck here forever." But then Nathan remembered something, the pocket watch he had found earlier. He pulled it out, staring at the cracked glass and the stopped hands. The time read 3:12, the same time that had been scrawled in his father's journal. "What are you doing?" Ryan asked, his voice desperate. Nathan didn't answer. He took a deep breath, then smashed the watch against the floor. The glass shattered and the whispering stopped abruptly. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the walls began to dissolve, the fog lifting, revealing a bright, blinding light. Nathan shielded his eyes, feeling a sudden warmth wash over him. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing outside, the hotel behind him gone, replaced by an empty field. Ryan stood beside him, looking just as bewildered. They had escaped, but as they stood there, catching their breath, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The pocket watch lay in pieces at his feet, and in the distance, he thought he saw a figure watching them from the edge of the woods. He didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away, knowing that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. If you enjoyed this story and it sent chills down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales like this one. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. And if you've ever stayed in a place that gave you the creeps, share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching, and remember, not every door should be opened. Stay safe out there. See you in the next one.